Welcome to the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast. My name is Clayton Craddock, and what do Chrissy Hind, Dean Martin, Doris Day, Bootsy Collins, Zapp, and Roger Troutman, Slave, Lakeside, Fazo, Heatwave, the Ohio Players, John Legend, Steph Curry, and LeBron James all have in common? They are from the same place as this man right here, Sammy Merendino. Thank you for coming on the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast. Trust me, I have a lot of interesting questions to ask you, and people don't know this, but I went to go see you play at Kinky Boots many years ago, and I gave you a hug. When you told me some information, I was like, oh my God, you? I grabbed him and I held him like a baby because he meant so much to me in my formative years, and I'll tell you why halfway through. Thank you for joining me, Sammy.
Thanks for having me, Clayton. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Akron, Ohio, that's where you're from.
Yeah, and I didn't even think about that, but all those cats are. Although I know, LeBron, I'm a big fan. He went to the same high school I went to for a year.
Oh, really? Were you there when he was there?
No, I'm much older than him. But
Okay.
My brother had called. I was in New York at the time. My brother had called me and said, "You got to see this freshman. This kid is going to be big." Turns out it was LeBron. He knew right away. He said, "This guy's unbelievable. Great guy, LeBron. Just, brought so much back to Akron."
Mm-hmm. Especially when they won the championship. I was like, man,
Yeah.
very, very happy for him.
Yeah.
I was a Warriors fan at the time. I was a little upset, but look, what he did in that game when he blocked. I don't know. Are you a big basketball fan?
Not huge, but whenever he's playing, I watch him.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I follow him around, And I actually went to one of the first Cleveland Cavaliers game when that team started up. My father had bought us tickets and we went. And there was nobody there, but it was great.
Wow, that's cool. Do you have a lot of family back in Akron?
Oh, I got a ton of family. I'm one of 11 kids, so
Wow.
I've got them and their kids now. I actually have a new nephew just born this morning, Theo. So
Wow, congratulations.
Huge family. Yeah.
So you're one of 11 kids. My God. Are you the youngest, oldest, in the middle? What's your?
I'm the fourth, second boy, but the fourth kid.
Are you from a musical family like the what's the group? The Silvers. I don't know if you remember the Silvers back in the 70s. They did Hotline.
Oh yeah. Yeah. My father was a musician. He played accordion. He was like the best cat in town. He played every Friday and Saturday, taught a couple days a week. That's how he put us all through school with that accordion. And my mom sang in the choir, and some of my brothers and sisters play, but I'm the only pro right now. But
what was your first musical memory other than your father playing those gigs?
Well, it'd be like everybody else my age, Ringo. Seeing Ringo play on Sullivan. I know everybody says that, but the thing is, that's what it was. I saw him. He's like a freight train. I'm like, that's going to be me.
That's amazing. I talked to Warren Oates about that. He said the same thing. Now, was it something back then where everybody knew that they were coming on? It's like, oh my God, you got to watch this at this time because there was no reruns back then, I don't think.
Oh, yeah, it was a big hype. Everybody knew that the Beatles were going to be on. And so, we were all like around the TV, and my parents too, they loved it. They thought it was the greatest thing in the world. They saw that thing. They were just as excited as we were. And it was big.
Did you hear about the Beatles before that?
Yeah, you heard about them. You heard some music on the radio and stuff. But when you saw them, it's different than today. Today it's great. You go online, YouTube. I can see somebody doing a session right then. Can you imagine? I wish I could say, oh yeah, John Bonham, Zeppelin's playing, and I'm watching them record it. The Beatles are at Abbey Road. Being able to get that right away, like you can now, but back then it was a lot more mysterious. So when they did come on TV, it was like, whoa! I mean, it was such a big, punch scene. It was just exciting as could be. You hadn't seen anything like that.
Did you like convince your mother and father that you wanted to get a drum set right after that? You're like, that's what I want to do. Can you give me a drum set? Like, how did the drums actually come into your life?
Well, I didn't have to do much convincing with them. My parents were really amazing about that. They're very supportive. And, my father was always like, his whole trip was like, do what you like doing and just do it better than anybody else and just be happy at it. And then he was cool. Even if you were a garbage man, he's like, be the best damn garbage man you can be, and then he'd be cool. But I was only 8 then. And my father being a musician and teaching, I said, yeah, I want to start playing. He was like, you might want to wait a little bit. And he says, you're a little too young to start playing. So, so I was just messing around. I'd, be hitting around stuff. He said, he always felt 12 was a good age. So I was kind of waiting. So when I was 11, actually, he said, why don't you go in? They're looking for kids that want to take lessons in school. And that was 5th grade. And so I went into the class after school, and I said, yeah, I want to sign up for lessons. I said, what are you teaching? They said, cello. And I went, cello. I said, when are you teaching drums? And they said, next year. I said, I'll wait. I'll be back. And I just walked out of the room because I don't want to play cello. It's a beautiful instrument, but it was drums, So I waited till the next year to start playing.
And that was?
Middle school? Pardon?
Middle school?
That was 6th grade, yeah. I was 12 years old. So, I got I had a pad, started on a pad like everybody else. And then, one day my brother came and found me. I was out riding my mini bike and he said, Dad wants you at home. He's pissed. And I said, really? I couldn't figure out. I didn't do anything, So he said, yeah, he's got to talk to you right now. I said, all right. So I'm like, oh man. So I go home. I walk in I'm like, yeah, what's up, Dad? And he opens up Ludwig snare case and there's a snare drum for me. And he got me my first snare drum.
That's great. That's cool. Did you start on the pad and playing traditional grip, or was it match grip, or did you?
Traditional grip. Yeah, I started playing traditional grip was the first thing. And, that eventually I switched over. But that was how, back then was how everyone was taught traditional.
Do you still
play that? Pardon?
Do you still play traditional grip?
Not that often now. It's I've been playing match grip for so long that it's just a different thing. And I could see where that it comes in handy and certain things. It's a different feel. You're kind of pulling up from the drum instead of going into the drum. It's a whole different thing. But I spent 3 years on that pad and that snare drum before I got a drum kit. So,
really?
Yeah. My dad was like, you better learn all of that stuff, And so I was very adamant about that. So I just practiced for 3 years on that, and then he actually let me buy my first kit. We were doing the 8th grade. There was like a band show, and I was building a bass drum pedal because I didn't have a bass drum pedal. I was going to use the marching bass drum in my snare. And he came home one Friday night and saw me trying to build a bass drum pedal. And he just kind of shook his head. He goes, come on. We got in the car, went to this place, Ross Music Store. And I picked out this little, I forget what it was called, like a Kent. I think the kit was called a Kent. It was like a blue agate. Looked like a Rogers kit, but it was really cheap. It was $100. And he said, you can buy that. He said, because I had some money from paper route. He said, I'll pay for it now. He goes, but Monday we're going to go to the credit union and get your money out and you can pay me back. And I was like, awesome. So I bought the kit. It was like $125. Bought a Krut cymbal with the brand, but it's backwards for Turk.
Ah, wow.
15-inch Krut cymbal. So anyway, so I bought it, set it up, and used that for the show on that Saturday night. It was my first drum kit, And,
who were you playing with?
That was with the grade school band.
Oh, okay.
First song I ever played in front of people, King of the Road. You know that song?
King of the Road?
Look it up. Yep. Roger Miller was the artist.
Mm.
It was a huge, big hit way back then. So anyway.
Okay.
Trivia.
Interesting. I remember the first song. Actually, I don't remember the first song. The first song I think I remember playing with somebody was 8 Days a Week by the Beatles. I was like, what is this thing? And the guy was showing me, and then we were just playing together. Anyway, I digress.
Great song.
Yes.
Ringo killing it on that.
Yes. One of the things about the Beatles, I think I was in college, and I was looking at some video, VHS, and it was some kind of religious thing. They were trying to convince people about the dangers of rock and roll. And and they were showing, people, doing psychedelic stuff, and they were playing a song And they're like, look at and see what this music does to people. And they were playing Tomorrow Never Knows. And people were like, freaking out. I was like, oh my God, that song is cool, man. That beat.
Oh yeah.
So let me get more into this stuff. I don't know what you guys are afraid of, but this is cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ringo, yeah, he's no. So other than Ringo, were there other drummers that you were looking up to back then?
Oh yeah, there was, the biggest three that I really was inspired by, and some I played like, some I didn't, but they were still inspirational. The biggest was Buddy Rich. I was a huge Buddy Rich fan. Saw him play back in the day. Buddy's Buddy. There's nobody like him. Big band drummer. Never will be anybody like him. Just he's great. And then John Bonham, of course, is probably one of my favorites. And then Tony Williams. So I probably played more like Bonham. I do like the way Tony. A friend of mine introduced me to Tony Williams to the Believe It album, and I was like, whoa, because he was rocking. He was really into the whole rock scene at that point. I love the way his hi-hats were just all sloshy and going, and just he was so tenacious and aggressive. So those guys were great. I mean, there's a million guys. As I look back, the drummer from the Bee Gees was awesome. There's just so many drummers that I've drawn from, but back then it was mostly that, but then as I got older, it would change, and then, I'm like everybody else. I take a little from this one, a little bit from that one, kind of try to twist a little bit and make it my thing. And then, as I went on, there were other drummers, Larry Blackman, huge influence on me.
Now, who's that? No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Huh?
I said, who's that?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah. But there's so many guys. It's really hard. As I evolve I'm always trying to listen and trying to get something. There's guys. Mickey Curry from the '80s, and even currently. One of my favorite all-time drummers. I'm always like listening, trying to just find something. Andy Newmark, Greg Errico. I remember seeing Sly, and it was like, who is this guy? Just seeing him on Midnight Special again. The thing. You had to wait back then. I remember waiting to see Greg Errico and Sly on Midnight Special. That it was coming coming in 2 weeks. And I was like, you couldn't go online and you just hear these guys and find it. So you're waiting and waiting. And in your head, you're kind of thinking of all these things. Oh, it's going to be this. What's it like backstage? I'm making up all these ideas of them getting into a limo, driving to the gig, Whereas now you just see all that stuff. So there's nothing really left to your imagination. And all those things kind of made me work harder, because even whether they were true or not, they were in my head, they were true. And that's what it was going to be like. So I was kind of like excited about that stuff.
When you were younger, you played in some drum and bugle corps too?
Just a little bit. There was a band called the Royal Judels, and I did a little bit. I did that for about a year, but it wasn't really where my heart was. And I played that for about a year, and it was fun. It was a good education, but it was more, I always wanted to be in a rock band.
Did you have any rock bands that you were in high school?
Yeah, I had my own band, and with 3 other guys. My best friend, still my best friend to this day, my friend Pete. And
what was the name of the band?
It was called Milestone.
Milestone?
Yep. Oh. No relation to the I think who was it? Was it Miles that had that? There was an album called Milestone, big jazz album, but it was more of a rock band. So we played all the in the air, we played clubs and high schools and stuff. And then after that, when I left, I joined this other band. There was a couple other local bands, but there was one big band called Easy Street. We were like the big fish in a small pond, and we did really well, played as much as we want, made a lot of bread.
Did you record any albums or like original recordings, or was it playing like covers of stuff in?
That band was all covers. And, I ended up leaving the band because we had opened up for Tom Petty one time, and we played a couple original songs, but they were a great band, but I had a lot bigger aspirations. And when I saw Stan Lynch playing with Tom Petty, I'm like, I need to move on from this band and get to New York. So it was like kind of like time to get out of here.
So after high school, you went to college? or you just went
Went
right
to,
to New York?
no, I went to college for 1 year, and my father had said, try it for a year, see if you like it. But at the time, I was working in the music store, which was really my only job I've ever had in my life outside of playing drums. So I was working in a music store, going to school and playing full time at night. And it was a lot to do, So after, the first year I dropped out of school. I told my dad, I did my 9 months, I can't do it anymore. He was like, cool, you tried it. And then a few months later, I got an offer to be in a local band. It was going to pay me enough bread to live on. And we were playing like 4 or 5 nights a week. So I left the music store. That was in 1976. And so, just a great, I remember walking out of that music store and the wind kind of blew against my face. And it was just like, it felt so freeing knowing I was going to be in a band, making money, playing, 4 or 5 nights a week in a good band with good players. And, I've never forgotten that feeling. So whenever like a breeze comes across and hits me in the face like that, I remember that day.
That's great. That's a great story. So the breeze was coming by and it was going through your flowing hair. Like we have.
The long hair that we all used to
have. And you started making money. And what was the thing that made you say, you know what, I want something more, or made you want to leave Ohio? Did you think LA, Nashville, and New York, and you say, let me just go to New York?
Well, what happened was I was going to move to New York or LA. I kind of decided I'm going somewhere. Because, Akron was a great place to grow up. There was great, we were playing in rock clubs. I mean, I was playing to 1,500 people a night there in a local band. It was a really big scene that we were playing the Agora Ballroom. We were playing all kinds of places. This place filled in McNasty's. We were playing in Kent. There was a lot of clubs. There was just a lot of places to play and people showed up. So it was really great to play and to get that time in, because there's nothing like playing live. You can practice all you want and you have to do that. But playing live for, 2-3 weeks straight, 5-6 nights a week, that's going to do more for you than just practicing for a couple of weeks, at least in my opinion, So I had decided I'm going to get out of here. I want more. I want to be in a band. I want to make records. I want to play with more people. I don't want to just be in a cover band, So as I was doing that, a friend of mine who I had befriended, Lenny Williams, was a young guitar player, and he was a poor kid from Ohio, like me, middle class, didn't have a lot of money, but this guy could play. He was an amazing player, and he used to come in the music store I worked in, and the boss would always push him out because he didn't want him. He didn't have any money to buy stuff. He said he's not going to buy anything. So when the boss would go to lunch, I'd call Lenny, say, Lenny, the boss is at lunch, come on down, you can play all you want. Because I loved hearing this guy play. He was just so good. So anyway, I'd see the boss coming back from lunch. I go, Lenny, you got to get out of here. And he'd run out the door. So anyway, we became friends. He got a gig with Chubby Checker. He was out touring, and he would start sending cards and stuff from Australia, postcards and things, and to my house, because he was close with my family also. Anyway, one day he called me and said, right when I was thinking about moving to New York, and said, hey, Chubby's looking for a drummer. He says, you want to come up? So I flew up to New York and auditioned for Chub. And that's how I got from Akron to New York.
What was the audition like?
Oh, the audition was awesome. It was very short because they were playing at the Ritz, which is, I forget what it's called now, down on 11th to 13th Street downtown. Webster Hall. Now it's Webster Hall. Anyway, so they were playing. So they did their sound check. And then as soon as their sound check was done, Chubby said, okay, come on, Sam. He goes, time to play. So I get up to play. And they were playing kind of Ramon style. Like everything was like, everything was fast, So he counts off the twist. Said, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I start playing, and I'm like really into it, and I'm hitting hard. So we play about 30 seconds, and bang, I go right through the snare drum, bust the head.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, oh, shit. I'm thinking they just did their sound check. Everything was fine. I broke the head. Oh, man, it's over. And Chubby turns around and says, what happened? I said, I broke the snare drum. I'm sorry. He goes, you're hired. And that was it. That was my audition. I mean,
Wow.
30 seconds a minute at the most.
So what do you think it was? Because you hit hard or you were solid?
Well, again, I had been playing for like, 4 or 5 years. I'd been playing 5 or 6 nights a week every night, and I was playing I was in a rock band. He wanted that. And so I was feeling pretty strong at the time and confident, I came in and I just, I had heard all the board tapes. I basically was prepared to play his whole show that night if I needed to. I learned everything. So he knew, he felt it right away. Like it just hit, But then, I think breaking the snare drum to him was like, oh, this guy's pretty powerful and strong. And, that was the thing. But in the 80s, it was a whole different kind of playing, really aggressive, and that was it.
And you went on tour with him for 18 months?
Yeah, about a year and a half. I went on tour with him. Might have seen New York City for 2 weeks total out of that year and a half. But we were playing 6 nights a week, 2 shows a night, and just playing all over the place. I went to Europe with him, which was amazing. That was my first time in Europe. And but playing around the States and just playing that many nights, again, it's that repetition and playing live. You can't beat, especially when you're younger, to learn. Playing live is going to do more for your playing because you're kind of just in the spotlight. You're playing. There's no, oh, let's start over. You got to do it. So you really raise your game, especially if you're playing with older players or better players. It'll just kind of raise you up, and you got to raise to that level. That's a big thing for me. It's like things you got to get out and play.
After Chubby Checker, you moved to New York City.
Yeah, and that was interesting because I didn't really know anybody here. I just knew a few people, So I was basically trying to get gigs, and so I would go into the Village Voice at the time. You go in the back, there'd be some ads, And
did you ever answer the? I remember when I first got here in the early '90s. I think they still had ads that said, looking for a drummer. No mercenaries, must have big hair.
Right. Oh yeah, there's all those,
No mercenaries.
Yeah, well, it's good to get paid. You got to get paid, or it's a hobby,
Exactly. So you were looking in the Village Voice, and you did you find any specific bands that you wound up playing with regularly?
Yeah, I saw an ad. It said Idol needs a drummer, and I'm like, Idol, Billy Idol. So I call up this thing and I tell them, what I've done. They're like, great. So I go to this audition, and it's a cattle call. There's 100 guys there at least. So I do the audition. Now you got to realize I had just gotten off the road again, playing a year and a half straight, nonstop. So my playing was pretty sharp at that time. So I go in, and out of the 100 guys, I'm the only one who gets the call back. I'm like, wow. Great. Wow. Well, I'm thinking, oh, great. I'm in New York. My first time in New York. Yeah, my head's starting to be a little bigger. Go back 2 weeks later, there's 50 guys. I beat them all, Go back the third time, it's down to me and like 20 guys. Beat them all. Damn. And then they say to me, well, there's one other guy that we had offered the gig to originally who had turned it down, and now he's thinking about doing it, so we want you both to come in. I'm like, okay, and I'm feeling really confident at the time. Mm-hmm. So I go in, we both play, and at the end of the audition, they go, well, you played better than him, but we know him and we really don't know you, so we're going to hire him. And it was like, bang, But it was a good lesson to learn. I was like, I need to get out and meet some people. People need to start knowing who I am. But I realized, it's not just your talent. Like, you can be the greatest drummer in the world. There's also your relationship, and different relationships you have with people. And, so that is a lot too. So you can't just go like, I'm the greatest drummer in the world. How come I don't work? So there's, you got to develop those relationships with people. So instead of me taking it as being, I was kind of angry. I really thought I was going to have that gig, and at the time I thought it would have changed my life. But looking back at it, it's better that I didn't get it because my life went in some other directions, which turned out fine, And I had a lot of second place finishes actually. And but everything you do leads you to the next thing you're going to do. It's all led me to where I am today. So it's hard for me to complain about not getting that gig.
So what were some of the second place finishes that you had?
Well, one was with John Waite. I went and auditioned for him, got the gig on a Friday night. They said, we're going to start rehearsing next week. We'll call you over the weekend. Got no call over the weekend. On a Monday, I called them. And they said, oh, well, the bass player left and we hired another bass player. And he said the only way he'd come is if he could bring his drummer. So lost that gig. And then, but the best second place finish I ever had that really led to more stuff for me was I went for the Psychedelic Furs.
Oh, man.
And
Love My Way?
Yep.
Sorry about my hand here.
On the way there, I was there a little early, and I had just moved into Manhattan. Because I had a place in Queens originally. I moved into Manhattan and paid my rent and my deposit and everything, and I had $5 left to my name. So I'm on my way to this audition, and I'm like, oh, I hope I get this thing. So on the way, I'm early, and I stop in this bar, Prince Street bar, and I'm having a beer. And I'm like, I have a beer. So the beer was $2.75. I was like, well, I can't buy another one. So I just gave the bartender the $5. I said, keep it. This is not going to do any good to me. So as I'm drinking that beer, I hear these two guys talking, and they're saying, should we put live drums on the session tomorrow, or do you want to get somebody that does drum machine? Now, at that time, I had already bought my first Linn drum, and I was messing around with it. And I actually bought it to practice with, basically, to make sure my time was good. And so I just jumped into that conversation and said, hey, man, I got a drum machine. And it's like, really? I said, yeah. They said, any good? I said, I'm the best in New York City. They're like, really? And they said, you want to do a session with us tomorrow? I'm saying, yeah, I'd love to. And they go, well, what do you charge? I said, what are you paying? And they said, well, we can give you $50. Now, in my head, I'm thinking $50. I could really use $50 right now because I'm broke. And I went, well, it's a little skinny, but I'll take it. I'll do it for you. So I ended up doing this session the next day with them. And, I went to the audition, went fine again, second place, didn't get that gig. But I started doing sessions at this place, Park South, and the studio manager, Steve Rosen, who I'm friends with to this day, took a liking to me. And I can trace all my album work back to that beer at that bar that day.
Wow.
As it just led to, there's a whole story of how it led to my follow-up.
So the beer cost you $2.75, but you gave him $5 total.
Yep. What am I going to do with the other $2.25? I had to tip him anyway, but I just like keep it.
So $2.75 led to you being worth $2,750,000.
I don't know what my net worth is. Maybe you check that. I don't know. But
I saw that on the internet. I'm just kidding. So I want to go back to the Billy Idol thing. I can't remember the drummer that was on the tour back then. Do you remember who got the gig?
Oh yeah. It was who we became friends. Greg Gerson, beautiful drummer, really great drummer. He was on that was the first when Billy just came out. That was in summer of 82, I think it was. Yeah. And Greg Gerson, great player, great player.
I ask a lot of older people that were around in the 70s and into the 80s. Now, we're drummers. We're used to playing live. You transitioned wonderfully into the world of drum machines. When did you see the transition coming? Like, okay, I better get started on this drum machine thing because it's going to be the wave of the future.
Well, what happened was I was living in, when I first moved to New York, I had a pad in Queens, just a room in a house I rented, and so when I came off the road, I was in there and I was like, I got to move into Manhattan. But for that summer, I decided I was going to just practice and make sure I had my stuff together. I wanted to really tighten up my time. So I bought like a little Roland 606 or something, a little tiny machine. And I got bored with it really quick. So I bought a Linn drum after that, LM2. And basically just to practice with. I was like, I took a loan out. It was $3,000 at the time. My dad actually co-signed for me a loan. He put his house up as collateral. Do you believe that? Which I didn't know till after he passed. My brother showed me the thing. My father actually put his house up as collateral for a loan for me to get a drum machine.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's crazy. But I started practicing with the machine. But, after I went and did that session, I realized, I can make a career of this. Like it was really fascinating because, like, first of all, the sounds were great. It was just like a different sound. It was, I've been playing for a long time, and I was totally excited by it. It was something new, and it actually wasn't something I planned. I knew I could do something with it, but it really took on a life of its own. It just got so much bigger than I even expected it to, and I was just fascinated by it. And I was always buying new drum machines, getting new sounds, making samples. It was, to me, it just felt like an extension of my drumming. It wasn't like necessarily replacing it. It was just another part of it. I always felt it was all linked together.
Do you feel that the emphasis on the drum machine and electronics took away from your playing?
In one essence, or, like in essence, no. In one aspect of it, it did, and the other it didn't. Like, I learned so much from programming, because by programming, I had to really analyze everything I did as a player. When I go to play, why does it feel like this when I'm playing? So like in my programming, I had grace notes, I had drags, I had rustle, things I could put in. So if I was like doing all this little stuff, it would do it, and I made all my own samples. So it was actually me hitting the drum. I didn't like using other people's samples. I was like, if I'm going to program, it's going to be me that you're hearing, So it made me really analyze playing. It made me learn a little bit more about making records, learn more about the studio. But then there was like a 5-year period where the only time I picked up a drumstick was to overdub a Simmons fill. So I wasn't playing live. I was so busy doing all this programming, So, there's good and bad about it, both, But I don't regret doing it, But, there came a point where I was just like, I'm not doing that. I made a choice not to do it anymore, and I just sold it all. So I'm done, Because people after a while, they forget that you're a drummer and they think you're a programmer. So after a while, I was like, I don't like the title programmer. It's okay for some things, but for me, I felt I'm a drummer. I want to be a drummer again. So I just stopped doing it. I'm like, not going to do it anymore.
Who was the first session with after that $2.75 beer meeting? Who was that with?
The first real session, or because I did a lot of demo sessions. The first session you mean that I did it was a band called Our Daughter's Wedding. They were kind of like a poppy punk band. It was 2 guys and a singer and a guitar player. Remember, the guitar player used to always walk in, he'd have a can of beer in a bag with a straw. Every day, every time I saw him. But that session was great, and that led to, from there, I started doing all these sessions at this place, Park South. This guy, Joe Veneri, was the owner. Steve Rose was the manager. So they had me on pretty much everything. Because, again, it was a new thing, and everyone wanted to do it. So I kind of like slid right into there. And then, they ended up putting me on this Weather Girls record. It was the second Weather Girls album. And after that record, that's where I met Larry Blackman. And that's where my career.
Wait, Larry who? I keep saying that for a reason. Now, this is where the rubber meets rubber. Akron, Ohio, is the epicenter of rubber. But this is where the rubber meets the road in this conversation. This is one of the reasons why I hugged him at Kinky Boots. Now, Larry Blackman was one of my all-time favorite musicians and influences and drummers, because I grew up in the late 70s and early 80s. Grew up listening to the Daz Band, Ohio Players, Zap, Phazo, Sky, The Time, Prince, Slave, and Cameo. And I loved Cameo from 1978 all the way to like 1988. Then I got into, back in the 80s, I got into rap music really heavy, because, rap music was in its prime, in my opinion, from like 86 to like 90, 93, 94. But in the early 80s, I was into Cameo a lot. So I knew every single thing that they put out. And when I was in college, a certain song came on in 1985 that everyone was dancing to, and you were dancing to this guy's drum beat. So let's talk about Larry Blackman. You met Larry Blackman because you were in Park South Studios and he heard something that you did, or how did that work out?
Well, we were cutting these tracks for the Weather Girls, and I was out sitting in the lobby, and I'm reading the newspaper, just kind of not paying attention to anything because I was in between. They were doing something like an overdub, and all of a sudden I hear somebody go, "Hey man, like who's playing drums on this? I dig that drum sound." And I'm reading the paper like this. I went, "Yeah, that's me." I didn't even look up, because I was kind of in the middle of an argument. "Yeah, it's me," like that. And then he goes, "Yeah, I dig it, man." He goes, "You want to play on the next record?" And then I looked up, and I look up and there's Larry. And I'm like, "Oh, damn," So I stand up, I introduce myself. He says, "Yeah, we're getting ready to do a new record." And I was, checking out studios and stuff. And I really like the sound you got going on there. So you want to do it? And I was like, "Yeah, great." So the next week I'm in the studio with Cameo and we're doing Single Life. And it was just amazing because, first of all, I love Cameo, and get to work with Larry is one of the founding fathers of funk. Come on, it's like the way he played was amazing. So we did Single Life, and then he asked me if I wanted to tour with him. So I did a little tour of the UK with them, about 3 weeks, and then on the way back from that tour, we were going back into and record the next record. And I remember Larry telling me, he goes, "I think I figured it out." He goes, "Our next record's going to be huge." And I said, "Great." And he says, "You want to do it?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course I want to do it." So we went in and we did the Word Up album. And, first of all, just being around Larry again, but, I learned a lot from him. And, but when we did Word Up, it was just this total flowing, like ideas were just coming out all over the place with everybody. It was just an interesting time, and I try to get back to that time. Every time I do a session, I'm trying to get back to that feeling of like, I'm not thinking, I'm just kind of being, everything was just coming out, and it was just an amazing experience. And then we got to make that record, which was pretty great.
All right. So going back, did you record all the drum did you do all the did you do all of the drum programming for the Word Up album, like Candy, Back and Forth?
Yep.
Don't Be Lonely?
Yep.
Damn. If I could reach through here, I'll give you another hug. Yes.
I remember that hug. That was good enough. That's still holding me, man.
My God, I told a friend of mine that I was going to be interviewing you, and he's like, "What?" Nobody really knew, other than the people that I guess were inside of the family, that you did all the drum programming for that.
It's Larry gets a lot of the credit, and Larry had tons of ideas. It's like Larry's still Larry, and he had the vision for it. But yeah, it's some people know and some don't. I should have done the video. They asked me to do the Word Up video, but I had a session that day, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm already booked," and I couldn't do it. Looking back, I wish I would have done it. Would have been a little better visibility. But yeah, that's me.
So how did the Word Up drum beat get come into play? Like how did that all come about?
Well, Larry had that stuff in his head. He's like, "Hey, I hear this, that's it."
Okay.
So he said, "I hear this kind of thing, with the high going to cha 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 to So I said, okay. So I started programming it, and I had this bass drum sample that I had, the first sample I ever made with my Lin 9000 when I bought the sampling card that I made in Media Sound with this engineer, Tim Hatfield, and it distorted. It was the first thing I ever recorded, and it was kind of went, and the engineer goes, "Oh, that's distorted." I go, "It's kind of cool." I said, "I'm gonna keep it. I'll use it one of these days," So we added that to a regular Lin thing, and that's where the bass drum sound came from. That was just those two put together. So it was an actual mistake and a sample, and a good sample put together that made a sound. We were trying to get past the single life snare sound, because I really like the single life snare sound. That was pretty cool. But Larry wanted to take that up even more, you know? So we ended up recording his hand clap in the hallway of the studio. It was Quadraphonic Sound on 7th Avenue, Quad Studios. I don't even know if they're still there. It was like between 48th and 49th Street. So it was Larry, you know, in this hallway into an AMS, and then we slapped that on top of another sample that I already had. It's mostly that and his hand clap with that big hall. It was like, you know, we're on the 11th floor. And, you know, and that was, you know, it was a really interesting thing. But it was, I'm trying to remember the engineer's name, French guy, great guy. Anyway, it was such a collaborative effort with everybody, because there were so many people like involved between me, Larry, the engineer, you know, everybody in that room brought that, helped bring that whole sound together, you know. But then, so then I, you know, I programmed the beat to where I got it feeling right, you know, because a lot of time I would just take the quantize off. I'd probably put the bass drum would be quantized, and then sometimes I'd take like the snare quantize off and just play it in till I got it to feel right. Because, you know, when you're playing, if you look at it on a grid, if everything's on the grid, it just feels very squared off and not feeling right. You know, it's just kind of like that movement inside of the bar to where it's like, it's got to be the same. You know, you always want that snare in a certain place. But so I would mess with it till I got that vibe right. You know, and once that was just like when you're playing, you can be playing something for a while and you go, oh, this is where it goes. It goes right here, you know. So once we got that rhythm right, then we started programming the whole piece, you know, and then we just figured out the arrangement and added some hits, all the different stuff, you know. It was great. But, you know, it went fast. That's the thing. It wasn't a thing that was really labored over, because there was such great energy in that room that the ideas were just flying, you know. And so things were really, I did that whole record in less than a week. It just all kind of was like, boom. Yeah, it was easy.
Well, you know, again, the transition from the 70s to the early 80s, where there were bands with 10 people, to a band with 3 people, quote unquote, a band. But it's really Larry, you, I guess the engineer, and I guess there were other people in this studio at the time. It wasn't entire, you know, a big band back then with Cameo. Was it mostly just him giving you the inspiration and the ideas? Were there other people in the band also working with you?
Well, it was Larry, and then Tommy Jenkins was in the band still, and Nathan Lieutenant. Those were the 3 key players. They brought up a guitar player from Atlanta, Pat Buchanan, because he was a rock guy. He was really great. He wasn't around a lot. Pardon?
Was Charlie Singleton helping out also?
No, Charlie wasn't in. I never recorded with Charlie.
Okay.
He was gone during the period I was in, because Cameo kind of went into a slightly funky rock thing. Like, you know, they had white guitar player, white drummer, white keyboard player with the rest of the band. So they wanted kind of a little bit more of a funk rock thing happening, you know. So they kind of picked us to kind of bring that in, you know. I lost the question. What was it?
So it was Nathan, Tommy, and Larry.
So it's mostly Larry. Larry had the vision. You know, he wrote those songs with Tom. Him and Tommy wrote most of those songs. We had some of the Kevin Kendricks, I think was his name, piano player, played a while. Kevin Hendricks. He played there. But it was mostly when we were doing the basic tracks, it was me and Larry and an engineer. You know, and Larry would kind of sing the idea, go, here's a song going like this, and it's going to be a verse, you know. I mean, on the first album, on Single Life, he actually went in the studio, recorded the drum parts, just quick pass of them, and then I put those on a cassette tape, and then I would just mimic it. I would do what he did. I would reprogram what he played in the machine, and then add a few little things, you know, add some stuff to it to make it mine. But he would really lay it out on the first album. The second album, we just kind of would talk back and forth and do it and do the arrangement. But it was mostly, you know, Larry had a lot of vision, you know, and even the sound. there was no reverb on anything. If you listen to the Word Up record, he didn't want reverb on anything. You weren't even allowed to monitor. It's like he fired an engineer once for putting reverb on. He's like, get out of here. I told you no reverb. Fired him.
Wow.
Yeah, it was hardcore.
So again, you did Attack Me With Your Love too?
Yep.
Single Life?
Yep.
I've Got Your Image?
Yep.
You don't know how many times I listened to these albums, man. You know, but also, again, being a drummer, I was growing up playing along to his stuff. You know, in the late '70s. I can't name it. Can't now. The songs are going to elude me, but you know, playing Cameosis, and then Knights of the Sound Table into. Okay, Shame, man. I need more.
She's Strange.
Oh my God, She's Strange. That drum beat. Everyone in high school wanted to play that drum beat. It's like, can you play this? I can play that. Can you?
Yeah.
Then exactly.
Yeah.
And then got that.
Yeah. I still playing that live was great. There's some footage on YouTube of us in London playing that.
Really?
But, yeah.
I wonder when he came. Did you ever ask him what was the inspiration for that?
Well, he was just trying to do that whole hip hop rap thing, you know, and he just, you know, he's a unique guy. He just, again, these thoughts just come in his head. He's just so talented, you know. He played that on the Simmons kit, you know, and I think it's an SDS5 kit. He played great. That's not programmed. He played that.
Yes, yeah, it sounds like that. Plus, there was a rap to that too. There was like a remix where he was rapping over it. Well, that's a rap in general. The song starts out with a rap.
Yeah, that's great. Brilliant. He's just brilliant.
One little digression. I don't want to take up too much time on this because I should just talk to you offline. But man, I wanted to get this on on record. During the lean years when I wasn't working as much and I started a family and I was like, you know what, maybe I need to get a real job. I got a job selling life insurance. So I got a list of people to call. And one of the people that I called was had Blackman on the name. So I called up and it was, I can't remember the person's name, but it happened to be Larry Blackman's son. Mm-hmm. And I called up and I went to go visit his wife. So I went to her house. I was like, you know, my name's Clayton Craddock. I am a financial services representative for MetLife. You know, we can do this and blank, blank, blank. She was like, okay, yeah, I hear you. I did my pitch. And then we wound up finishing the but my sales pitch. Then I was walking around and I saw a picture of like Cameo in like 1978. I was like, how do you know these guys? My husband is whatever Larry Blackman's son is. I can't remember his name again. I was like,
Larry.
What?
It's Larry. Oh, Larry Jr.
Yes. So I was like, what? So we started talking, oh yeah, Larry's going to be, Larry isn't really into politics, and he was campaigning for the re-election of Mike Bloomberg in the 2000s. And he said, yeah, Larry's going to be at this thing, and Larry Blackman's going to be there too, his father. I was like, what? So I went there, and I didn't get a chance to meet Larry Jr., but I saw Larry Blackman, first and only time I ever met him. I walked to him. I said, hey, man, so great to meet you. Is there any way that you can tell me, what's going on? I forgot the name of the album. It was an album that was like one of their albums right before She's Strange. And it was an album that wasn't, it was like a cutout at the time, basically albums that were disbanded, really. So I was like, can you tell me, this is going to be re-released? It's like, oh man, hold on 1 second, brother. Hold on. He saw this woman walking by. And that was it. He went to go talk to some lady. I was like, okay, I get it, dude. I get it.
Well, if I see next time I see him, I'll ask him. I'll let you know.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my brush with,
that's pretty fun, yeah.
with Larry. Yeah. So you did all this programming with Cameo, and now did it raise your profile in the programming world? I know you said eventually you and like I don't want to do this programming stuff. You went on tour with Cameo, and did you go on tour with other people at that time in the mid '80s?
No, not much. You know, what happened was I did the Single Life record, went on tour with them, and I was like, this is great. I love playing in the band, huge horn sections, big band, you know, it's awesome. Then Word Up came out, and then all of a sudden everybody wanted that. They're like, hey, you got to do this to our record. Now it's like, that's pretty high bar to reach. You know, it's, you know, being able to accomplish that once is, to me, is just like, I can't believe I even got to do that. But like trying to repeat that is pretty hard. But all of a sudden I was like one of the top call session programming guys. So, you know, I went to double scale. I was making a ton of bread. And so Larry asked me to go on the road after, you know, for the Word Up record. And I was just like, I don't know if I can, Larry. And he says, well, you know, we're paying you, you know, $12.50 a week, and that's $1,250. I said, yeah, I really can't afford to do that, Larry. He goes, well, we'll pay a little bit more. And I said, yeah, I can't, Larry. He goes, well, what are you making now? I said, well, I'm making between $1,500 and $2,000 a day.
Oh my God.
Well, there was such a demand for it, and it was double scale. It was basically me and Jimmy Braylauer doing most of the work in town. Jimmy being the king, he was amazing. You know, he really did a whole scene with that, and I loved what he did. But I was just like, I couldn't do it, you know, and as much as I wanted to go play with them, you know, I couldn't do it. And he understood. So I still did the next record, Machismo, with him. But I got so busy between commercials and records that, you know, I'd be turning down tons of work. It was just, I turned down more than I would have gotten paid touring. So it was just, you know, the time, the 80s was flush. You know, there were labels, a lot of label money. There was just a lot of bread going around. So it's a different scene than right now, you know. It's like the tail end of the golden age of recording, you know, through the 80s into the early 90s, and then it kind of really dissipated.
By the way, I'm looking at their discography. Again, I grew up when I first really heard about Cameo. It was the Cameosis record, 1980. I just loved that record, and of course, Feel Me. I was into Nights of the Sound, Nights of the Sound Table, and Alligator Woman. That's like they were at their peak for me. And then they came up with an album called Style. And I was like, oh God, man. I know you guys are trying to recreate the success of Alligator Woman, but it wasn't. Nobody really liked it other than me. I kind of like some of the songs in there. That's the album that I asked Larry about, and then of course She's Strange came out, and then you took him to another level with Single Life, and then Word Up and Machismo. Machismo or Machismo? Now this did you do Skin I'm In too?
Yeah, that, you know, that song is kind of relevant today. You know, it's like that's a great song. And I just remember cutting that one because we cut that at the Hit Factory. I was actually doing Hall and Oates and Cameo, and I do commercials in the morning, Hall and Oates in the afternoon, Cameo at night. And I remember coming down to cut because we were both in the Hit Factory, Hall and Oates and Cameo. So I remember like bringing my gear up and down, just switch from this floor to this floor every day, you know. And making that record was great. Skin I'm In. That's a great record, and you know, pretty strong, you know, lyrically and musically on every level. So
yes,
yeah.
Some of their songs still have relevance to this day, like of course Skin I'm In, and now again, man, what's wrong with my memory? Talking Out the Side of Your Neck.
Yep.
About politics and politicians.
Yeah.
Like he was saying things that would make you think.
Yeah.
And make you dance at the same time. But going back to Machismo, there's a song called one of my favorite grooves, which again I'm sure you probably did. Soul Tightened.
Yep.
Oh, man. That drum beat is just fucking cool, man. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for spending so much time on this, but let's.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. You know?
This is the guy. Go ahead.
Another thing I would say about the cool thing that I really liked about Larry was him and I didn't have any kind of like color issues and racial issues. It was never even like discussed. We just both kind of went like, we were very like-minded as far as grooves and music and stuff. And he was like, him and all the whole thing, was very accepting and very welcoming of me into that whole band. It was just kind of like, it wasn't an issue of you're black, I'm white. That was never an issue. And I really appreciated that it was just, we just came together musically. And then that was the thing. We were just like brothers, drumming brothers and music brothers. And it was really, to me, and I get kind of chills just thinking how great that always felt with them to like be accepted, and just the way it was just that was never an issue with us. And it was really a great thing, and still is to this day with him, when I see him.
So one of the better things about being a musician in general, it's like the color or even sex thing doesn't really matter. It's like, can you play? It's a true meritocracy.
And I love that. That's what it should be.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Word Up led to working with Hall and Oates.
Yep.
And others. So what did you do with Hall and Oates? And then that led to stuff with other people like Pat Metheny and Ziggy Marley. And
yeah, that was a great one. Ziggy, I remember working with him, got to meet Rita. She was awesome. Ziggy was awesome too, man. He's the real deal. He heard the littlest, tiniest changes in hi-hat patterns and stuff. He was very in tune with all that. We did this tune, Look Who's Dancing.
Oh my God. Another hug. I used to be a little part-time DJ in the early 90s, and I used to play that song, and that beat was, man, okay, ladies and gentlemen, do you know who you're seeing right here is one of my serious inspirations right here.
Yeah. Well,
seriously, that groove is no joke. But go ahead, talk about Ziggy again. I'm sorry for
it was just a great day. Went in there and recorded, and again, the real deal. He was just very welcoming. Get this Italian kid coming in playing a reggae record, and it was awesome. But it just kind of, you heard the song's great. It's a great song, and that was good. All these things, they just, one leads to another. I'm doing Hall and Oates. From that I get this. From that I get this. Will Lee recommended me to Pat Metheny. There's just, it was like I was saying earlier, everything you do leads to the next thing you're going to do. Even the things you don't do kind of lead to the next thing, So there's always a path. There's always something, for me, at least, and I'm not speaking for anybody but myself, I can find something good in the worst situation. Because again, for me, if something doesn't happen for me, that means there's something else over here that's going to happen, or that I'm supposed to be doing. So I don't worry about when I don't get a gig, or if I get fired from a gig, unless I look at why. I always wonder, why am I not doing this gig? I'll take a true inventory of what happened, but everything leads to something else. So I take all those losses as positive feedback. It's like a way to move forward.
You work with Anita Baker,
mm-hmm.
Joan Osborne. Were these on the records, or were you doing live stuff with them?
All records. I didn't start touring again until 2000 with Cyndi. I had pretty much decided to do sessions after Word Up came out. I decided to stay in town. I did a couple little Japanese things with this band, the Hammonds, which was Jeff Bova and Akiko Yano. I did a little tour of Japan with them, which was awesome. I love Japan. But I'm mostly focused on recording. And then until 2000, when I met Cyndi, recording a record with her. And then I ended up joining her band for at least 10 years.
So how did you meet Cyndi Lauper?
Well, I had a studio downtown, and a friend of mine, Stuart Lehrman, he was supposed to record vocals for her one day, and then he couldn't do it. So he said, well, why don't you go to Sam's place? He's got a studio on 13th Street, and maybe he'll put drums on the record for you too. So she came in and I programmed some drums for the record, and it was actually for a Rugrats movie, and it was Mark Mothersbaugh co-wrote it with her, and so we did this track, and then she said, "Hey, I'm going to start my record in a couple of weeks." We hit it off. The same thing. Cyndi and I kind of hit it off right away, and there was a definite meeting of the minds there, and so I started doing her next record, and then she said, "Oh, I'm doing this TV show, Girls with Guitars. You want to do it?" I'm like, "Sure." So I went out to LA, recorded that with her, and then came back. And then she said, "I'm doing a little tour. Do you want to do it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do it." And then I just was in her band. She never really asked me formally to join the band, but then all of a sudden I was just her drummer. So it all came from that session, from having my studio and being able to move forward with that.
Huh. So that eventually led to one of the things that we're going to be talking about later in your career. In the 2000s, you were doing a lot of touring. You did Cyndi Lauper, and what are some of the other tours that you went on during that time?
That was it. That was the only person I was touring. I was Cyndi's drummer, and we were touring. We would tour different times each year, but it wasn't like a constant tour. But we'd go out for a month. At first, we'd go out for a month, come home for a couple months, go out again. So it was, I was just kind of still doing some sessions in between there. But then it started, certain years, like when we were on tour with Cher, we were out for 7 months straight, come in for a couple of days. That was great, though. That was a lot of fun. So I was mainly just recording with Cyndi, touring with Cyndi. That was kind of like took up most of from 2000 to 2009, outside of some, a few little things in between. But it was mostly her. She just just took over everything. And that was an unexpected thing. I really never, I told my wife, I had just sold, right before I met Cyndi, I sold all my road cases. I was like, I'm not going to go on the road again, I'm not planning it. I sold them all. And then a couple of weeks later, I meet Cyndi, and she's like, "You want to go on the road?" I'm like, "I've got to buy new road cases. That's a good problem to have."
The touring with Cyndi Lauper, did you have, I guess back in the 80s, did you have endorsements with drum companies back when you were with Cameo, or did that happen with Cyndi Lauper?
Oh no, I had endorsements starting, in the 80s. My first endorsement was Vic Firth, which I'm still with since 1985. Vic actually signed me himself, so I met Vic, and so that was my first one. Then I had Remo drums when I was with Cameo. It was endorsed with Remo, and then I moved on around 87 or 88. I went to Pearl, and I also was with Paiste cymbals for about 30 years, starting in 85, 86. So I was with them for a long, long time. And then around 2000, what year was it? 4 or 5, I switched to Sonar. I left Pearl and went to Sonar.
Now, why'd you do that? What is it about Sonar that you like?
Oh, I love Sonar. I'm still with them to this day. I love everything about them. They're just built so well. They sound so good. They've got a new vintage series out now that has the baseball edge, the baseball bat, kind of like the old Gretsch rims. The vintage series sound vintage. They're made like their old 60s vintage series. But the drums are just great. The company is very supportive. Sometimes I want a weird sized drum. Like I make some 15 by 15 floor toms. They just made me a 14 by 9 rack so I can get a little lower for the new show that I'm doing. They've just been really great. So, and they sound amazing, and they hold up, they stay in tune. I got no complaints with them,
That's so great. Another friend of mine loves Sonar.
Who's that?
It's Andrew Atkinson.
No, yeah?
Yeah, he's going to be doing the Michael Jackson show, but he's done a bunch of other jazz stuff and other things in the past, but he just swears by Sonar.
Oh, great. Well, we're going to have to grab dinner in between shows.
Yes. Yeah. I'd love for you guys to chat, but I'd love to actually hear the I've heard how great they are, but I don't really know their sound, so I need to actually play some.
Come over and play.
I should do that soon.
Just set up upstairs. Come on, you know. One other thing I want to tell you, and I did switch to Zildjian a number of years ago. So I did, after I had a really nice relationship with Pisces for a long time, but then my ears shifted a little bit and sound, and I moved to Zildjian about 7 years ago. So all good companies.
Cyndi Lauper, Kinky Boots. Tell me how you got involved with the show Kinky Boots.
Well, I had done all the demos with Cyndi for Kinky Boots. We had been doing that for a number of years. She said, I forget how early it was. It was 3 or 4 years before the show came out, and she said, you want to do demos with us? I was cutting tracks. I have a studio in my house here. So she'd come to the house, we'd cut drums, cut vocals, cut a bunch of different ideas and stuff. And this was going on and on. So then they started to do the readings, and I wasn't a Broadway guy. I couldn't get arrested on Broadway. I met some guys and they're all like, yeah, we'll have you. And they never called. And I understand why, you do need some experience in that genre, and being in a pit is a whole different world than being on stage. Even though I felt I can handle that, most people in the Broadway were like, yeah, you're a rock drummer. You're not going to get what we do here. And I was like, all right. So they were doing the readings, and I was actually the fourth drummer in. So they did the first reading. Cyndi hated the drummer, even though this drummer, and I know who all these guys are, world-class Broadway drummers, each and every one of them high up. But Cyndi didn't like the first one. Cyndi didn't like the second one. Cyndi didn't like the third one. It's not even that she didn't like them. I think it was more that she wanted me to do it. So after the third one, because Cyndi has a very specific thing, I've been playing with her for a long time, so she's used to what I do, and I had done the demos. So one day she came in and didn't like what the drummer was doing for whatever reason, even though it was probably no fault of his own. And she just and this is the story I had heard from some people in the room because I wasn't there, slammed her foot down and said, he's out, Sam is going to do the show, and that's it. And so then she called me up and she told me the story, and she says, you'll do it, won't you? And I was like, oh yeah. I was hoping she'd have called me to be first, but anyway. So then I went in to do it. And it was kind of a backdoor entry into Broadway. It's the thing I was talking about before, you have to have relationships. I didn't get it just because I know her. I'm definitely qualified for the job, but being that I was in her band made a big difference, being that I was the guy that did the demos, So, I went in to do it, and I remember getting a call from the contractor saying, hey, I never hire anybody I don't know, so Stephen's going to come up. I hear you're going to recut a track tomorrow. Stephen Aremus, the supervisor, is going to come to your house, and if he likes you, you can have the gig. And I went, okay, and I just started laughing. I go, you might as well just hire me now, because I knew I knew what we were cutting, and it was a song that I cut in one take anyway, and we are just basically making a little edit to it. So Stephen came the next day, I cut it down in one take, and he was like, this is great. I was literally hired that day, So, it's just happened to be, I got in,
A lot of drummers nowadays that are very young tend to come from a lot of music schools, and they want to go directly to Broadway. Was there any time in your life that Broadway was ever on your radar?
Not when I was younger. To me, again, earlier when I was talking about getting out and playing, I didn't start looking into Broadway until 2000 or so, right around then, mid 2005, something like that. I was like, this looks kind of interesting. Before that, I had no interest in playing Broadway. But what I was saying earlier about playing live, all the guys that I've played with on Broadway that I really, there's few exceptions, but most of them are older cats that have played and been in bands and have learned how to play with other people. And sometimes when, if you come right out of school, you don't come right out of school and become a brain surgeon or a doctor right out of college. you go and you work in the emergency room for a couple of years. You know, you're an intern. You do all these different things till you can get up to that level of being a brain surgeon. Not that drums is brain surgery. You know, it's like far from it. But the point being that coming straight out of college and going into Broadway, to me, is not the way to do it, because you should get on the road. And I think Warren Oates always says this: you need to go sleep on some floors. You need to go get laid. You need to do some drugs. You need to go play every night and learn how to play with people, learn how to be with people, you know, because that's what's going to develop you as a player. And then come into Broadway a little later when you have something to really add, you know, to where you really can play the music and not just the notes. Like, a lot of people can play the notes, you know. I've seen a bunch of guys play the notes. They can play the page, you know, but they're not really playing music. And so I think from playing with other people, sleeping on floors, experiencing all those things, that's what will make you a better Broadway musician.
When people reach out to you to want to sub for you, what are the things that you look for when hiring new subs for your shows?
Two things only. Well, three really, but two main ones. You got to be as good as me or better to sub, because my name's in the.
That's why I couldn't sub for you.
Yeah, you would be fine. You would tear it up anytime you want. You let me know. You got to be as good or better than me, because my name's in the book, and I don't want to be, you know, at home relaxing or out doing whatever I'm doing and get a call from the conductor saying, "Who's this guy you brought in here? He stinks." You know, you got to keep the integrity of the show. That's really important to me. You know, it's like, and plus my name's in the book. I don't want somebody to be out there going like, "Who's this drummer? He's terrible." You know, that's my ego. But man, I want the show to be protected. And don't be an a-hole. It's kind of like, that's the second one, you know? Don't be that guy. You know, those are the two things. I don't care what color you are. I don't care if you're male or female. I don't care how you identify. If you don't meet those first two things, you're not subbing for me. And those other ones don't matter to me at all. You know, I mean, I just found this wonderful woman, Maya Stepansky. She's 22 years old. Oh man, keep your eyes out for her. She's definitely subbing my show. Killer, just killer. You know, I'm hiring people on their ability, you know? So those are the two most important things. And of course, don't be late, you know? So those are the three. And then, you know, you can make a whole list of things, you know, just come in, mimic me. When you come in, just be me. Don't be you. Nobody's looking for you to be you. Come in and be me. And then you'll work more, because that's what they're looking for. They don't want you to be you.
It's interesting you say your name is in the book. When I was at Ain't Too Proud in 2019, I got a text. It was a direct DM in Instagram from Aaron Spears. You know, I looked up to a lot of stuff that he's done working with Usher and a whole bunch of other people, and I see a direct message saying, "My God, you know, I loved your playing. You sound great. You guys sound really authentic, man. Keep it up. Anytime you want to hang out, here's my number." I was like, "What?" Now, imagine if I wasn't there and one of my subs was there and he sent that to me. That would mean that person was doing the job that I hired them to do. It's basically sound like me. And to do this, sound authentic enough so that Aaron would say, "My God, you sound just like the Temptations records from 1968, 69. So yeah, you know, you have a point there. I just never really thought about it that way. You want somebody to represent you when you're not there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You get into Kinky Boots. That runs for how long?
Well, I think that show ran for a little over 6 years. And I did it for, I think, 5 of those 6. And then the conductor, Will Van Dyke at the time, asked me to come and do Pretty Woman with him. And that was Bryan Adams writing music. and Jim Valance. And I was a huge fan, of course, being a Mickey Curry fan, how can you not, there's no way I could say no, even though Kinky Boots was an ideal situation. It was a really great situation for me, from the top, from the production down to the ushers, everybody was amazing, and I got treated really well. But I was tired. I'd done it for 5 years. I'm like, yeah, I think I'll move on, and I want to start up because it's fun to start up the show, to actually originate the book and be able, because I got to write all the drum parts in Kinky and do all the programming for that, which was big for me. And then the same with Pretty Woman, I got to write the parts. So I was ready to move on. So then I moved on to that one. And unfortunately, that was a little short-lived. That one only, ran for a year, which was a little disappointment. But it was a great year.
So did Pretty Woman close before Kinky Boots did?
I think it closed not long after. So it was like close to the same time, I think Kinky closed maybe halfway through the Pretty Woman run.
Okay. What happened after Pretty Woman?
Well, after Pretty Woman, I had like nothing going on, which is kind of funny. I was like, I hadn't been doing any readings, which is kind of key to getting a new show. You got to like develop a show. Hopefully you get called to do the readings and you can be on board. Because, the drummer comes with the show generally. So
before you go on with that, tell people listening what are readings and workshops, and have you done many of them?
Well, I've only done 3 Broadway shows. And so I've done all the workshops and the readings for the first 2, for Kinky and Pretty Woman. And what those are, people are developing the show. So the first time it might just be people sitting around a table with no music, and they're reading through the show, and they're going through it. And then eventually they bring in a piano player, and they're going to add some of the music here. So then months later, they're like, oh, let's bring a drummer in, and we're going to kind of start working on the show, some of the choreography. And then, as the show progresses, they bring in more musicians, or they'll bring in more orchestrations to get things working. So if you're at the beginning of that as a drummer, you kind of like usually generally move along with it, and then you can kind of walk into the show because you've been in it since the beginning, most of the time, not always. And it's not a guarantee, but if you're around doing these things, so a lot of guys do a lot of these. They get called. Sean McDaniel's king of that. He does a lot of those. Rich Mercurio. There's a lot of guys that do readings and developing. But at the time, I was just kind of like, well, wasn't getting calls for that, And a lot of times, I'm brought in to. Like with Cyndi, they didn't like the drummer, they brought me in. So it shows you how these guys were in the readings pushed out. But I got brought in for these. So anyway, I had nothing going on. And this was 2019. And I was like, well, doesn't look like I got anything in the future, any shows. So I actually had applied for my pension. I said, I'll take my pension a little early. So did all the paperwork, filled out all the forms. It was all set up to happen in December. And then middle of November, I get a phone call from Mike Aarons, the contractor. He said, hey, I might have a gig for you. I'm like, really? He says, yeah. He said, the show's coming to Broadway, and the drummer that was doing it had taken another show, not knowing that they had gotten a theater for the new show. And that was Rodney Howard. Rodney, great drummer, really solid guy, great drummer. Anyway, he took another show. So the chair just opened up. So it was down to me and a couple other guys, and I met the MD, Ian Eisendrath, and we hit it off. And so I canceled my pension because you can't, you have to have it. Once a pension starts, you can't work for a couple months, and then you can start working again. But I was just like, well, I'm not going to take it now. So luckily it all worked out that I could cancel it. And then I started up, and that show's Diana, about Princess Diana. So that started in December of 2019. Yeah. And then, we started rehearsing, and then we were in previews, right before COVID hit. So then it just shut down. So that was a year and a half ago. So in the meantime, though, we recorded it. they filmed the show for Netflix. So it'll actually be available. It's coming out in October 1st. You'll be able to see the show before we even reopen on Broadway. So that's pretty exciting. But we're going back to work. I start in a few weeks.
One of the things about doing workshops and readings, one of the workshops that I did prior to starting Ain't Too Proud was for Diana, since I worked with David Bryan and Joe DiPietro at Memphis. I just had that connection, and I did. And I was like, Diana, is this going to really be something? Is this going to work out? And when we started going over the music, David Bryan writes really catchy tunes.
Yeah.
He knows how to write a catchy tune. David Bryan's a keyboardist for Bon Jovi. And we were in doing the songs. It's like, okay, this is good. And Ian is great to work with. We were just trying to come up with parts and work and just coming up with ideas and then seeing how it all worked with the show. I was like, okay, I can see this becoming a pretty good show. And then I didn't see the dancing at all because that stuff came later. But I just saw how it all came together, and some of the people that were involved in producing Memphis were involved in producing Diana. So I was like, okay, they have the creative team, they have the producing team, they got the music. I think it's going to be a hit. And then you guys are about to open. Now, what happened? Did you have previews and then everything shut down? How did that work?
We were like 2 weeks into previews when COVID just shut us down, and so everything was just put on hold. And But yeah, it's great that you and I have that in common, And
yes.
I'm sure you sounded great. You'd have sounded great on this show. You tore it up.
Man. Some of the stuff is like it's just there's like a '80s pop thing because I guess they were trying. Again, I don't know what the songs are now. I can't remember the names of the songs, but it's. I could tell you it's going to be good. So I'm looking forward to the actual movie that's coming out. And one thing about David, I mean, he's very determined. He's like, man, we're going to do this. We're going to get it done. And I'm glad you guys are moving forward with this. So,
yeah, he's been great. Working with him is really great. You could, he's very open to ideas, and he has certain things he hears. You see him over there air drumming.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's another thing. When you're doing this stuff, you got to take cues from these guys. Like when I see him air drumming, I'm going like, well, he's hearing something, and I'm putting my ego aside and going like, yeah, okay, I might have been doing that, but he's kind of doing this.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's cool. Okay, let me kind of find something that fits where he's kind of hearing it, and then, it's nice to be able to have that kind of relationship. And, even like when I was working with Brian and Jim on Pretty Woman, Jim Valance, who's a drummer, had some specific ideas. And so I said, how about this? And I started to play something. He goes, no, I kind of like my idea. So I went back to his idea. And then 5 or 10 minutes later, he tapped me and goes, your idea was better. And I was like, well, thank you. So he was cool enough to say that. And there was another thing that he goes, I want you to play what you play. And I said, no, man, what you played, was great. So I was really loving that, So it's interesting working with these guys. And plus, here I've got like Cyndi, Brian, and David, from Bon Jovi. It's like some 80s thing. So it kind of all fits also in my main chunk of time, I kind of fit in the show as well. So.
And all that stuff matters. Going back to what you were saying earlier, as far as going out and playing, if you know the music where that these things came from and the styles, because I remember, because it matters. I remember when we were doing Memphis, David Bryan was like, just go ding ka ding ding ka, like Tico would do. And if you don't know who Tico Torres is, and from Bon, I mean, of course you should know who Bon Jovi is and know what that means. He's like, I just want meat and potatoes, man. Just meat and potatoes. You got to kind of understand where he's coming from. Even during the Diana workshop, he was like, yeah, play the shuffle like on Aerosmith's, I guess it was not Love in an Elevator. Maybe it was Love in an Elevator.
Yeah. Joey Kramer's got that bell thing.
Yes. It's like, just do it like that. Yes, and you kind of have to know what it makes it easier if you know what he's talking about.
Right.
So if you're coming from, I just know Les Mis and Miss Saigon and all that. It's cool. It's cool if you're going to do all that stuff, but creating a new musical like Pretty Woman or Kinky Boots or Diana, and even something like Memphis, which wasn't really about Memphis soul. It was, David Bryan's version of Memphis, which there was some gospel, there was some souls, there was some funk, and there was some rock in it. But knowing that musical background makes things much easier, especially when it comes to writing a drum part to a new show. Which,
I saw it, not to interrupt you, I'm sorry. I did see you play Memphis, you know that.
Really?
Oh yeah, it was awesome. It was just like, it was near the end because John Putnam, guitar player, it was near the end and he said, hey, I got a pair of tickets. And I was like, great. And I came and I watched it and I was like, this guy's good. It was really great.
It probably wasn't even me. It was probably my sub, which is a good
representation. No, it was you, because you were on stage.
Yes, we were. Yes, we were.
So I know it was you.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you. So being a drummer on a Broadway show, you've had people come in. I don't know if you've had people that have come in that haven't been successful as a sub. Has that ever happened to you, that they've come in, they learned the show and they didn't do a good job? The reason why I ask is, like, what are some of the things that a drummer that is coming to sub for you should never do when they're subbing for you? Or in general, what do you think that drummers should never do?
Well, I only had one issue with one sub, because most of the guys I have, like, I kind of use a lot of the same guys. I'm adding a few different ones now because some became unavailable. I had one guy that just really didn't learn the book. And like, I provide for my subs a video of me playing the show, MP3s, charts, unlimited access. You want to call me as many times as you want to call me. And like the first two shows I did, I was also running Ableton, which was an added pressure. So I'm running the whole show. The conductors give me the 3/4 and boom, and I'm triggering stuff. So part of it's like, as you're playing, you have to trigger a lot of different scenes, for different stuff. This guy thought he had it and he didn't. And I always told him, if you're not ready to come in, don't come in, because you really basically get one shot. It's hard being a sub. It's much harder being a sub than being the original. I'm being me on this show. I'm coming in, Kinky Boots and Pretty Woman. I'm writing the parts. All I have to do is be me. That's easy. It's a lot harder to be somebody else. So I tell my subs, take all the time you need. And even if you're booked for your first show and you don't feel comfortable and you say, I'm not ready, tell me. I'll come in. I won't get mad at you. It's not a big deal. So I think the main thing is to be prepared, overly prepared, not just know it. You got to know it in your sleep. So you got to come in, because you don't get to rehearse with the band. You don't get to practice. I give them a conductor video, so they can actually practice with that. I have one of my top subs and one of my closest friends, John Michelli, plays with Meatloaf. My Kinky Boots kit was ridiculous. It had triggers and drums and everything all over. It was like, and the kitchen sink. Literally, there was a sink there. But he made like a mock setup at his house, and he played the whole thing. So, it's about being overly prepared, and you got to be able to come in. He was designated after his first show.
Wow.
He was just like, it was like me. He was me. So, the thing is, be overly prepared and ready.
When you do your shows, a couple more questions, and I'm going to wrap this up because I could go on and on and on. When you do your shows, do you keep the music on your music stand and look at it? Because I ask people that have come from an arena where you have to memorize an entire Cameo show. You don't have music. You don't have music. And I don't know what you did with Cyndi Lauper, but you had to memorize a bunch of different things. Do you memorize the show that you're on, or do you use the music as a guide, or do you do both?
Well, I absolutely memorize it because I want to get past the point of reading. Some guys are really great at reading and playing at the same time. I'm more like a feel guy. Like, I just want to play the song. I don't want to be looking at notes, So, and I'm from a rock and roll background where you don't use music. Like, when I was with Cyndi, there was no music. It's like, get it up here, So I like to be able to come in there and play. that being said, especially on my first two shows where there was so much riding on the Ableton, and there were so many different trigger points, what I did is I have all my music on an iPad over to my left, and then in front of me is a big screen. I have like a 20-inch screen or so of the music. And that's mainly because I don't want to be playing like this, because, you get hurt after a while, playing 8 shows a week and being all twisted up, you got to really think about how you set up, or it's got to be very ergonomic, because you can really, I've had problems with joints and stuff from bad setups and stuff. But those shows, I would keep the music up just as a safety in case if my mind was gone I was like, oh, geez, sometimes you're playing and you're just kind of in that moment, but your mind can just take off for a second. It's like, oh, I'm here. So I always have the safety net of that. But like Kinky Boots, by opening night, I never even opened the book. That one, it just stayed closed. Pretty Woman, I would just toggle through it just to have it there. And this new one, though, Diana, this one, Clancy, John Clancy, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, brilliant. He wrote all the drum parts. So I'm actually being John on this show, which is kind of, it's made me a better drummer, which is really interesting because I've had to do stuff that I normally wouldn't do. Normally I wouldn't play the fill starting with my left hand on this one, or I wouldn't do a fill going this way around the drums, where he does a lot of that. It's from right to left. He's got all these backwards, and it's kind of following the music a little more, because he orchestrated the show, so he's thinking of it in a whole different way. He's thinking a lot more melodically than normally. And this is a bigger setup. Like usually on one rack and 2 floors. This is like 5 toms. It's military snare. There's all kinds of Glock.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So this one, I've got my same rig set up, but like I'll probably have the music up a little longer on this show, just because I'm being somebody else, and I'm taking. He let me like put a little of my thing on. He's like, do what you want, but I'm trying to honor what he wrote because everything's on top of that. So I can't go changing all these patterns because he's orchestrated everything on top of that. So I got to honor that, and it's good for you to be somebody else.
That's great, man. I could talk to you more and more and more, but we don't have much time. Actually, we don't have any time left. I want to thank you very much for being part of this conversation and sharing your story. And where can people find you if they'd like to find you on social media?
You can find me on Instagram. I don't go on as much as well, I don't even know if I should. I just, whatever. I like to play drums more than I like to be on Instagram. But you can find me at Sammy Merendino on Instagram, or you can go to my website, sammymerendino.com. Or you can always find me at the theater.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, which theater is it going to go into?
With the Longacre.
And where is that located again?
48th Street, just off of 7th.
Okay.
Yeah.
48th, man. Remember the days on 48th Street where you can actually buy musical instruments?
Oh, yeah. Man, these are great. Yeah. We're right across from Hadestown.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yes. Is that where? I think I know. Is Hadestown at the August Wilson? I'm not sure. Anyway.
It's on the north. It's on the north side of the street. We're on the south.
Okay. I got you.
Yeah.
You can find Sammy Merendino on his website, on Instagram, and at the Longacre Theater, doing the show Diana, which is going to open up when?
Previews start November 2nd, and then I think opening's the 17th of November. And watch us on Netflix October 1st. You'll be able to hear us too. We recorded the whole thing and they filmed it, so it'll be pretty interesting.
Great. And it'll be running for the next 15 years, so make sure that you...
you and me both, my brother.
Exactly. Thanks again, Sammy. Great talking to you, and we will see each other on the Broadway campus.
Great. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye.